Gordon Klayne didn't like morning calls. Especially before dawn. But this time the phone didn't just ring, it broke the silence like an alarm. "Mr. Klayne? This is Agent Laurie from the Department of Justice. You need to come to the office immediately. This concerns your fund." The voice on the other end of the line was cold and formal, as if he had already passed sentence. Gordon, the owner of the investment holding company Klayne Capital, known for his ability to turn any business into a gold mine, put down his cup of espresso without even taking a sip. A moment ago he had been looking at the magnificent dawn over Manhattan and thinking about a new project. Now the light flooding his penthouse seemed artificial, like a set that was about to be removed. "You must be mistaken. My fund is working perfectly. Come now, Mr. Klayne. And get a lawyer." He hung up, feeling the metallic taste of fear filling his mouth. While still in the elevator, his secretary called him. "Mr. Klayne, we're being searched. FBI people. They're taking out the servers." Gordon stepped outside in his perfect Brioni suit, but for the first time in years he felt like he didn't belong. A chauffeured Lexus was waiting, but instead of the usual greeting, the chauffeur just nodded, avoiding his gaze. The Klayne Capital office was a post-apocalyptic affair. Men in dark jackets were rummaging through documents, employees stood to the side, some in tears, others with stony faces. One of the agents glanced at him briefly and said, "Mr. Klayne, you're suspected of market manipulation and fraud on a particularly large scale. This is absurd." His voice trailed off, but no one stopped to hear him. In the office, the lawyer he had worked with for a decade stood unceremoniously. "Gordon, the Securities and Exchange Commission has found a connection between your funds and offshore Panama. If it's true, you'll be destroyed. If it's not true, you'll still be destroyed in the press." He leaned back in his chair, looking at his reflection in the mirrored windows. Outside, somewhere, people were rushing to work, drinking coffee, making love, arguing, none of them knowing that his name had just become a poison on Wall Street. The phone rang again. This time, it was a private number. A voice he hadn't heard in a long time. "Gordy. It's Sarah. I'm sorry to be calling now. But, they found those letters. And now it's not just about money." His heart stopped. Sarah is the only person who knew about the 2010 deal. A deal that could have ruined his career back then. And if she spoke up, it was the beginning of the end. He hung up the phone, and for the first time in 20 years of successful business, it seemed to him that he was standing on thin ice, beneath which there was a depth, dark and bottomless. The end of Act 1, he does not yet know that he will lose much more than money. His first instinct was simple, almost childish: explain. Gordon gathered the press in the lobby of the office, a stand with the Klayne Capital logo placed against a wall of living moss, as if nature could reinforce the truth. He stepped out into the presence of dozens of microphones and cameras and said the worst phrase of his life: "We have always acted within the law." The "we" sounded false, like a falsetto in a poorly chosen musical. When one of the journalists shouted, "What about Panama and Mirador Energy?" he blinked for a split second, and that was enough. The clip of that blink spread across the internet faster than any of his trades. Within 2 hours, investors began demanding redemptions. Within 4, the first margin calls. By evening, the fund was cracking like ice under a heavy ice flow. "Keep your mouth shut," the lawyer in the hallway growled. "Every word is a nail in the coffin." "You said to speak honestly," Gordon replied quietly. "I said to speak carefully." The board of directors convened an emergency meeting in the evening. Desmond, the CFO with whom Gordon had once spent the night in the server room, rubbing cold coffee into his tired eyes, now sat as straight as if in court. "We're cooperating with the government," he said, not looking up. "I signed an immunity agreement." "What did you do?" Gordon's voice went as empty as a room after an auction. "I'm not going to jail for your decisions in 2010. The word 2010 hung between them like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. Mirador Energy. The merger that was supposed to be his triumph. An internal audit then revealed toxic assets and bribery of a Texas regulator. Sarah, then a young analyst, brought him a confidential memorandum of evidence. He burned the document in a metal urn, swearing to himself that he was saving jobs and pension funds. "The crime is what is proven, not what is done," said his mentor, Everett Sloan, then, and put his hand on his shoulder. Now the same Sloan was in the news, declaring, Mr. Klayne hid risks from the board and falsified accounts. He sold him with a phrase that had once been given to him. At night, in a cheap coffee shop near Penn Station, the man sitting across from Sarah was not a tycoon, but a tired man, his hands trembling slightly over his cup. "Sarah, tell me you didn't hand over the letters." "I kept copies. For 10 years, my conscience kept me awake. And then they came to me. They showed me the Panama Papers. Your name is there, and your signatures." "Forgeries," he said hoarsely. "I didn't open Alethea Holdings. Someone set up a shell fund for us." "I know. The seal from Sloan's office. The Mirador deal is a cover. The money went to political contributions and one silent death of a witness. They put it on you, Gordy. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I loved you. Because I believed you'd get away without it. And now, they gave me protection. And I signed. I'm sorry." As they left the coffee shop, they were met by photo flashes like a winter blizzard. The headlines the next morning were a verdict: Klayne is the architect of a shadow empire. Social media, fueled by old jealousies, burned even deeper scars: montages, memes, slander. His daughter Maya had written him a short note: "Don't call. You've ruined everything." He read the message over and over again, like a prayer that had no addressee. The government had frozen his accounts. Marshals had arrived at the penthouse and were describing the property, touching every item with plastic gloves as if his life were an evidence package. The neighbor who always asked for private school recommendations had thrown a cold shame at him. Former partners had turned away as if death were contagious. Everett Sloan had gone on cable news and, with a carpeted smile, was talking about corporate ethics, as if he hadn't taught him how to twirl numbers like a coin between his fingers. "Mr. Klayne, we have a warrant," Agent Lowry had said, standing in the doorway of his office for the second time in a week. "Today we're seizing private servers and phones. And, the council has lost trust in you. You've been suspended from managing the fund. That's it? This is just the beginning." He leaned against the table he'd bought at Sotheby's in London, and for the first time felt that would had a memory, too. It creaked like his inner spine. In the mirror, a man with no name, no job, no future, only a past that had returned like a boomerang and was already flying back with a metallic whistle, stared at him. The phone rang with a final thud, a message from the bank about the forced liquidation of his positions. Then, silence, and in that silence burned his reputation, his fortune, his home, and that fragile something that had kept his daughter by his side. When he emerged from the building into the cold rain, the city looked the same, only he had changed. And if the universe wasn't what it seemed, then perhaps the truth had a different shape, too. But in that moment, he knew one thing: he had fallen. And even the ground beneath him belonged to someone. He spent a week in a cheap motel in Jersey, where the smell of damp carpet fought with the smell of bleach. In the evenings he listened to the couple arguing in the next room, and during the day he went through old reports, looking for a crack in which to insert a wedge of truth. But everything he found looked like a carefully staged play. His signatures were on documents he had never seen. The chains of transactions were perfectly constructed to link his name to offshore companies. This was no accident. This was the work of someone who knew his every weakness. On the third week, a letter arrived. Handwritten, with no return address. In the envelope was a flash drive and a short note: "Gordy, if you want to know who sold you out, come tomorrow at midnight. Pier 47. Don't answer the phone. He recognized the handwriting immediately, Alex Mercer, the former CIO of Klayne Capital, who had disappeared 5 years earlier after a cybersecurity scandal. The pier was empty at midnight, except for the streetlights that hummed as if someone had turned them on to their last volt. Mercer emerged from the shadows, thinner, with a gray beard. "I thought you ran away to Singapore," Gordon began. "Run away? But that's not it." Mercer tossed him a flash drive. "They've got the mail server logs for 2010 to 2011. I hid them when Sloan ordered everything destroyed. You've been the scapegoat since day one." Gordon looked at him suspiciously. "Why now?" "Because I'm on the list too. They want to weed out those who know too much. I saw them create Alethea Holdings from the IP address of Sloan's office. I saw the transfers to Senator Marlowe's campaign and the account that paid for Julian Hayes's disappearance." The name Hayes struck like an electric shock. Julian was the main witness in the Mirador Energy investigation, and disappeared a month before the hearings. Officially, a boating accident. Unofficially, everyone knew he cost someone tens of millions. If these journals are real, they are real. But that's not enough. There's a second archive, in a safe at the Halberd Trust in the Bahamas. It contains Sloan's correspondence with Marlowe and the Mirador deals. And, your name isn't everywhere there. Sometimes instead of you, the code Orion. I think it's him. Gordon felt something like fire rise in his chest for the first time in weeks. "Do you want me to fly there?" "I want you to decide whether you're going to fight. Otherwise, destroy the flash drive, and you might just be forgotten." He returned to the motel in the morning mist. The flash drive lay on the table, like a black pill from which there was no going back. He inserted it into the old laptop and opened the first file. In front of him was a copy of a letter from Sloan to Marlowe. "Once the operation is complete, Orion will no longer be a threat. All traces will be removed." The date was 2 days before his fund began to collapse. Gordon remembered Everett's words, spoken once at the cigar club, "In big game, you are either the hunter or the trophy." Then he laughed. Now he knew that he had always been the trophy, he just hadn't been skinned yet. For the first time in years, he felt not fear but determination. Somewhere between the mold on the carpet and the hum of the old refrigerator, a plan was born. And it began with becoming a hunter again. End of Act 3. Gordon has received proof of the conspiracy and sees a chance to turn the tables. Gordon spent 3 weeks in the shadows, planning like a chess player who knows that this is his last game. He understood that a direct attack on Sloan would be suicide. He controlled politicians, corporations, the media, and could wipe anyone out of the public eye in a single news day. But he also understood something else: Sloan needed control, and any gap in the chain threatened him as much as Gord. The archive at the Halberd Trust was the key. The problem was that it could only be accessed from inside the bank. And here chance presented an ally. Lillian Ward, a former Halberd banker and now a bankrupt single mother whom Gordon had met at a charity auction years ago, agreed to help. "He ruined me too, Gord. After I refused to sign off on a faulty audit for a senator, Sloan cut me off from the market. I've lost everything." She looked at him with that mixture of hatred and hope that only those who have lost their fear have. Together they devised a plan. Lillian would lead him into the bank under the guise of an internal security audit. Then he would break into the vault where the Orion archives were kept. Friday, 2 p.m. Minimum customers, maximum chances of a quiet operation. When they entered the Halberd, the smell of expensive wood and air conditioning brought back memories of a time when he himself had considered himself untouchable. Lillian spoke to the guard in a confident tone, and he didn't even glance in her direction. A minute later they were in the stainless steel corridor leading to the depository. The vault opened with a code Lillian had gotten from a former colleague. Inside, in a metal case, lay a hard drive with the Mirador Energy logo. Gordon picked it up, and at that very moment he heard footsteps. The door opened, and on the threshold stood Sloane. In an expensive linen suit, with the same smile with which he had once signed multimillion-dollar deals. Gordy. You've always been too emotional. Leave it and get out. I'll give you a chance, live in peace, you'll still have some money left somewhere in Macau. But forget my name. You killed Julian. You blamed everything on me. I saved the empire. And you're just a cog in it. Cogs get replaced. Lillian stood aside, waiting for his decision. He felt two voices fighting inside him, one whispering to accept the offer and save himself, the other shouting that the truth was worth even his life. Do you know what your mistake is, Everett? His voice was quiet but firm. You thought I was afraid of losing. But I've already lost everything. He smashed the disk against the edge of the safe and pulled out the flash drive he'd previously connected to the bank's internal network. The data was already being copied to a remote server via a secure channel Mercer had set up. Sloane rushed towards him, but Lillian stood between them, pulling a gun from her bag. One more step and you've got another unfortunate accidental disappearance, Everett. Gordon left the safe without looking back. He knew that now the hunt would begin for him with renewed vigor. But this time he had a trump card, the truth, hidden in a cloud that could neither be burned nor drowned. The sun was glaring when they stepped outside. What now? Lillian asked. Now it's all or nothing. And he was ready for both options. The news exploded like gasoline spilled in the sun. The Orion archive fell into the hands of independent journalists, and within a day the headlines on the world's front pages were, Senator Marlowe at the center of financial conspiracy, Mirador Energy, bribery, offshores, missing witnesses. Everett Sloane's name now sounded not as a synonym for success, but as a brand of rot. Gordon watched it all from his small apartment on the edge of Brooklyn. He didn't celebrate. He didn't call reporters. He didn't try to clear his name on talk shows. His name was still in the dirt, and he knew that it was impossible to completely clean himself up in this game. But he had destroyed the mechanism that had destroyed him, and this time it wasn't about money. One evening there was a knock on the door. Standing on the doorstep was Maya, the daughter he hadn't seen since the collapse began. I saw the news. They say you turned them in. I showed the truth, he said quietly. But you also made deals that. Yes. And maybe that's why I knew how to stop people like Sloane. She was silent for a long time. Then she just sat down at the table and took a cup of tea he had just made. There was more reconciliation in that silence than in any words. A week later, Mercer called him. Sloane is under investigation. Marlowe has resigned. But you know, Gordy, in this system, one monster replaces another. I know. But sometimes it's enough to stop the one who has already devoured people. He started working for a small charity that helped ex-convicts adapt after prison. Many looked at him with suspicion, the rich among those who were being ground up by the system. But he made no excuses. Every conversation, every help was an attempt to redeem something from himself. At night, when the city fell silent, he would go out onto the roof and look at the stars. Once he had dreamed of getting them, as a metaphor for power, success, money. Now he understood that real stars are those that shine in the darkness without benefit to himself. Sometimes he asked himself, is it possible to be rich and honest? He did not know the answer. Perhaps wealth in itself is a temptation that sooner or later breaks your spine. Perhaps honesty is not a state, but an endless choice that you have to make every day. But he knew one thing, in a world where you can buy everything, sometimes the most expensive thing is what you don't pay for with money, the chance to start from scratch and, even if you fall, remain human.